The story begins with a man who wakes up in an unfamiliar place. He feels safe and comfortable but then hears a sound. Although he initially thinks it's his dad, he soon realizes it's someone else. A screen appears with a message welcoming him by his name, Anthony. Anthony is surprised by the polite message, but then he receives another message revealing that he has passed away, which shocks him. He wonders if he has entered heaven, and then receives a message on the screen telling him to be calm, as he will soon awaken to experience life again in a new world. Anthony is taken aback by the deep, gruff voice that sounds like the legendary bearded figure dressed in all white, Gandalf. That mysterious voice tells him that he will be reborn into the world of Terra, where destiny and luck will determine his fate. Anthony asks if his life will be filled with adventure, peril, and opportunity, with magic and fantastical creatures, to which the voice responds by showing his level as 1. Anthony is surprised to see that his species is ant worker, and his skills are bite, acid, grip, and digging, which he finds low and wonders where his overpowered skills are. He also blames himself, thinking that he may have harmed someone in a past life and that's why he's being punished. He then realizes that it's impossible as he did not have any friends in his past life. While he was still thinking, a countdown of 3 seconds started and a message appeared on a screen, saying, "Initializing soul in 3 seconds." Gradually, the countdown reached 0 and a message appeared saying, "Soul transfer complete." Then he noticed an ant egg somewhere. Inside that egg, Anthony was in the form of an ant. Breaking free from the egg, Anthony emerges into a dark tunnel, his vision blurry. He notices a blue light in the distance and feels relieved that he can still perceive colors. Curious about his new abilities, he begins to explore, sensing unfamiliar smells and air currents. Anthony, who fears loneliness in this life as well, becomes anxious about his isolation. As he continues toward the blue light, he finally catches a scent, filling him with hope that he might find a new comrade. However, he remains apprehensive about what lies ahead. Determined to follow the light, he reassures himself that nothing bad could happen if he reunites with his ant brethren. Encouraging himself, he vows to assist his new colony for its glory. Reaching the source of the blue light, Anthony is horrified to discover a monstrous crocodile devouring ants. Terrified, he thinks to himself that he didn't sign up for this. He spots an ant trapped under the crocodile's leg, seemingly looking at him for help. Anthony, feeling helpless with a serious resolve, he decides that there's only one course of action is to flee. He scurries back into the tunnel from which he came, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the crocodile. Once he feels a bit safer, he contemplates his next move, worried about encountering another predator in the tunnel. Suddenly, an idea comes to him. Anthony started digging with his 2 hands but quickly realized that it was inefficient. Then it dawned on him that ants use their mandibles to dig. Adjusting his technique, he began to dig with his head, utilizing his mandibles. To his relief, this method proved effective. He tirelessly carved out a large underground tunnel, hoping to evade the monstrous crocodile. The mere thought of that terrifying creature sent shivers down his spine. As he worked, Anthony couldn't help but think about the irony of his situation. New ants should be born inside a colony, surrounded by allies, yet here he was, alone and vulnerable. The memory of Gandalf's voice echoed in his mind, mentioning something about skill points and biomass. He wondered if he had some sort of resource to spend. If this was a game-like scenario, surely there had to be a way to access a menu or status screen. Anthony decided to experiment. He stood on his hind legs and waved his front legs in the air, but nothing happened. Frustrated, he tried various gestures until, suddenly, a status screen materialized before him. He was shocked to see that screen. We can see that Anthony's ability and levels: his digging level is 1, the acid shot level is 1, the grip level is 3, bite level 2. At first glance, these numbers seemed impressive to him, but he quickly realized they were quite low. Examining his skills further, he focused on the grip skill. A description appeared in his mind. The grip is the ability to hold onto surfaces and objects without letting go, including walking on walls and ceilings. Anthony marveled at the built-in help system that provided explanations when he thought about the skills. He pondered the implications of his grip skill, which enhanced his ability to adhere to surfaces with his 6 legs. He had completely forgotten that ants could walk on walls and ceilings. Excited by the possibilities, he resolved to try it out as soon as he could safely leave his hiding spot. Then he saw other skills like bite, digging, and acid shot. He had no idea where he was or what kind of creatures lived in this place besides ants like him and the croca beasts. Communication seemed impossible since he was fairly certain he didn't have vocal cords. This meant that if he wanted any information, he would have to gather it himself. He needed to venture out into the tunnels. He took a deep breath and calmed himself. Anthony reminded himself that he had figured out his base skills and now needed to spend his skill points wisely. As he contemplated his options, a status screen appeared with a message. Would Anthony like to spend his skill point? The status screen displayed that Anthony had 1 skill point and 1 biomass unit to spend. It suggested using skill points to purchase new skills or upgrade existing ones, and using biomass to improve or modify aspects of his physical monstrous form. The skills available for purchase included stealth, dash, slashing attack, chomp, and tunnel sense. Body improvements available were exoskeleton, mandibles, legs, eyes, antennae, and acid gland. There are a lot of options, Anthony thought. It's very difficult to choose. He has to think logically here. With survival as his priority, he made his decision. Eyes +1 and stealth. Immediately, he selected the eye upgrade. The moment he did, he felt a maddening itch erupt over his eyes, like 1,000 mosquito bites all at once. Despite the intense discomfort Anthony endured, knowing these upgrades were essential for his survival. As the itch gradually subsided, he sensed that his eyes had become slightly larger, although it was hard to tell if his sight had improved while he remained in his dark hiding place. He thought that if he were still human, achieving such a transformation would have taken a much longer time. Determined to explore, he started walking through the tunnel. The passage stretched into darkness, curving slightly at the edge of his vision. Soon, the tunnel split into 2 paths, left and right. The path to his right was where he had seen the beast devouring his brethren. He didn't want to go that way, knowing there were threats in that direction. This left him with only one choice: the left tunnel. Anthony chose the left tunnel and proceeded cautiously. He then decided to test his grip skill and began to walk up the wall. Stepping onto the roof, he continued until he was hanging upside down, gripping the ceiling tightly with his tiny claws. By hugging the roof and moving upside down, combined with his new stealth skill, he hoped to remain undetected and pass unseen. He moved cautiously down the tunnel, using his antennae and front legs to find solid footholds before gripping hard with his feet and moving forward. The tunnel was illuminated by a faint, eerie glow that allowed him to see that his carapace had begun to harden and turn black. He recalled from his ant-keeping hobby that newborn ants had soft white exoskeletons that gradually hardened and gained color. It seemed he had been huddling in the wall longer than he thought. Following the tunnel, as it curved, Anthony suddenly found himself at the entrance of a tremendous cavern. The tunnel walls fell away, revealing an expansive space. His antennae picked up fluttering vibrations, and a myriad of scents assaulted him all at once. The water seemed suffused with a blue glow, illuminated from beneath by veins of light in the basin floor. Anthony deduced that the monsters were making those growling noises. He saw a wolf-like creature and several centipede-like creatures scattered across the cavern floor. The 2 creatures took turns drinking from the water basin, watching over each other and rumbling warning growls at anything nearby. Anthony activated his stealth mode, which helped him remain unseen, and continued observing the creatures. Suddenly, he spotted the crocodile monster as well. He noticed that there was no conflict around the water pool at all. He decided to move a little closer for a better view, wondering why these creatures weren't attacking each other. He also noticed that his stealth level had increased to 2, confirming his suspicion that skills could be trained through use. His stealth skill had improved by moving without being noticed by the monsters below him. Anthony realized he could hide and continuously observe the monsters, moving very slightly the whole time, which would allow him to gain information while training his stealth. He took a few slow, deep breaths to calm himself before continuing his approach. One mistake could mean death in this place. He made his way closer to the pool, allowing him to see the creatures on the other side more clearly. The shifting mound of creatures was revealed to be a mass of centipede-like creatures, twisting and falling over each other. The last beast he saw was a small, squat creature with 4 legs, resembling a lizard but with long, stone-like spikes rising from its back. Of all the creatures there, it looked the least threatening, but since the other creatures were giving it a wide berth, there must have been something about those spikes that made them avoid it. Anthony thought that these terrible creatures were a potential harvest of biomass, the red envelope of XP, waiting for him to reap. Over the next few hours, Anthony diligently stayed hidden above the pool, gradually shifting his position to remain concealed. He observed how the creatures moved, taking special care to note where they went after leaving the pool. The centipedes slithered away to the opposite end of the cavern, and curiously, the crocodile did as well. The wolf moved into a small tunnel opening on the south end, close to the tunnel Anthony had emerged from. The spiky lizard wandered off towards a wall and started to climb up before he lost sight of it in the shadows. After all the creatures had left the cavern, Anthony returned to the tunnel he had dug earlier. He checked his status and saw that his stealth skill level had reached 3. He activated digging mode and began to widen the space, using the excavated dirt to start blocking off the tunnel on the side leading away from the cavern. After some time, his digging skill had reached level 2. After a few hours of shifting dirt, he was able to completely block off one side of the tunnel, leaving only a small gap in the roof. His stomach twisted and cramped, a familiar sensation from when his family didn't send expense money or neglected to put food in the fridge. When he woke up, he would hunt his first prey. He already had a target in mind. After some days, Anthony perched on the roof of the cavern, his claws dug into the cold rock. There was only one thought in his mind: food. He was so hungry. All the delicious things he had been able to eat in his previous life were spinning through his mind. The last time he saw a crocodile, he swore it looked like a cow and nearly leaped at it from the ceiling. The centipedes were starting to look like a tangle of noodles. He had to solve this situation before he got himself killed chomping on something he shouldn't. Anthony had been planning for 2 days. He had studied every aspect of this end of the cavern in excruciating detail. He had spent so long hanging upside down over the water basin that he nearly fell asleep and dropped into the water. That would have been a swim he wouldn't enjoy. For all this preparation, his stealth level had become 4 and his digging level had become 3. He knew these skills were pretty much useless for now, but hopefully, soon he'd be able to conquer his first prey. His antennae twitched suddenly. The target was close. He could smell it. Concentrating hard, he tried to focus his eyes. He was currently positioned away from the pool in a very dark area of the cavern. The snaking light veins along the walls were far apart here, allowing deep shadows to exist. His chosen prey was the lizard that had been using the wall on this side of the cavern as a resting place, crawling down to the floor and over to the pool once each day to drink. An isolated creature with a predictable movement path that he thought he could defeat. He saw the lizard and knew it was time to execute his plan. Cautiously, the armored lizard moved down the wall. Anthony's stomach rumbled. He needed to be in the right position to strike. The armored lizard was directly below him now, facing away from his position. The large spines protruding from its back looked so solid, as if made of stone. Anthony told himself he couldn't start thinking negatively. When the time came, he flipped his body around, took aim, and fired his acid spray directly at the target. The liquid fell through the air at tremendous speed, splashing against the rock and covering the armored lizard's feet with a flawless strike. The creature cried out in pain as the acid began to burn its legs. It tried to turn and find the attacker, but Anthony was already moving, racing down the wall behind it, all thoughts of stealth gone. The lizard saw him approaching and tried to turn, tilting the fearsome spine forward to cover as much of its body as it could. Anthony thought, "This is the wrong battleground for you, lizard." Even though he tried to bolster his confidence, he was still terrified at this moment. His first battle, his first hunt. He couldn't fail here or his life might be over. He had to focus. The lizard was bracing itself for close-range combat, but just before Anthony closed in, he suddenly turned and blasted the lizard with acid once more. The lizard growled and hissed as acid continued to burn its feet. Growing desperate, it suddenly lunged forward, its spikes rushing directly toward Anthony. He dodged, and the spikes passed just over his head. Before the lizard could retreat, he darted forward, mandibles wide open, and snapped them closed on the lizard's head. It released a pained growl as his jaws squeezed tightly, but he hardened his heart to its pain. He apologized to the lizard, but it had to become Anthony's food. He noticed that his acid shot skill had leveled up to level 2. He fired off 2 more shots, right into the soft belly of the lizard. He hoped that using the acid would finish it off, but after enduring its pitiful cries for 10 minutes, he hardened his resolve and used his mandibles. His bite skill also leveled up to 3. He thought that he had never worked this hard for something in his past life. Suddenly, a message appeared on his status screen. He had defeated a level 2 Spinita Lacerdos, and Anthony had reached level 2. He realized that he could gain experience to improve his level when he defeated other creatures in this place. Additionally, he learned that he gained a new skill point when he leveled up, and this was also true for the other creatures here. Almost forgetting why he came here, he rushed over to the lizard. Burns and melted flesh from his acid could be seen alongside crushed limbs and puncture wounds from his bites. He took a bite and was shocked by how disgusting it tasted. A new message appeared on his status screen. Anthony had consumed a new source of biomass, Spinita Lacerdos, and he was awarded 1 biomass. When he finished his meal, he climbed up the wall, made his way to the roof, and sneaked back over the water pool toward the tunnel that housed his nest. Several minutes later, he reached his nest and checked his status. He was proud that he had managed to survive, secure his first meal, level up, and improve his skills. He had 2 biomass points, so he decided to improve his eyes to +2. Immediately, a mad, ravenous itching sensation consumed his eyes. He could only endure it by flopping onto his back and rolling back and forth while scratching at the earth's walls with his claws. He hated this feeling so much. Finally, the itching faded, and he could immediately tell that his eyesight had improved once again. Objects were still blurry, but by waving his leg in front of his face, he could detect that his ability to see movement had improved quite a bit. He still had skill points to spend. He had a skill in mind for some time now, ever since he first saw it. Since his priority was still gathering information, scouting, and survival rather than a direct increase in battle strength, this skill would be extremely important to him. By improving his sense of direction, he'd be able to range further from the nest to gain information. There was a risk, however. By not increasing his ability to fight and hunt for food, he risked more disadvantageous combat. He clicked the yes button, and a warm, tickling sensation, like water running through his hair in a shower but deeper inside his head, came over him. Perhaps he didn't notice this before since he upgraded his eyes at the same time he purchased a skill. Soon the feeling faded. Tunnel sense had been learned. He couldn't feel anything different straight away, but hopefully it would show its effect as he explored. For the first time with a full stomach, he decided to get some rest, recover, and then push into brave new frontiers. Then he slept. After a good rest, filled with the contented and happy feeling of being in his own enclosed space with a full stomach for the first time in this world, he awoke refreshed and ready to approach his next challenge. He needed to further explore the cavern, gather more information on his situation, and try to identify his next prey. Before that, however, there was something else he wanted to try first. After eating, Gandalf informed him that he had unlocked a basic profile of the Spinita Lacerdos. He hadn't yet tried to access this profile, and it was time to experiment and see if he could learn something. He opened his status panel and saw information about the lizard. The Spinita Lacerdos was translated to Thorn Lizard. He thought this was only the basic profile and believed he needed to access a more detailed profile with more useful information. Emerging from his nest, he made his way across the roof to the rock pool. A now familiar scene greeted his eyes. A collection of monsters, types he had seen before, loitered at the water's edge, warily guarding against each other while drinking from the glowing pool. With his newly improved +2 eyesight, the pool seemed to glow slightly more brightly than it did in the past. The curious thing about this situation was that all these monsters were here to drink, yet he had not, in the several days he had been in this monster ant body, felt thirsty. Since he was also a monster, just as these creatures were, what compelled them to drink the water from the pool when he felt no urge to do so? That question emerged in Anthony's mind. He decided that the next mission today was to investigate. He would take a bold, brave, possibly stupidly suicidal step to shed some light on this mystery. Continuing to move in his almost habitual slow method, he crept across the ceiling to the nearest wall, made his way down it, and onto the cavern floor. Then, slowly at first, but with growing confidence as each step propelled him forward, he approached the pool. The first to notice him was a lizard hound, a wolf-like creature with a long reptilian tail. There was a large proportion of lizard-like creatures in this place. The huge bipedal crocodile monster and the spiked lizard he had hunted earlier had some form of reptilian features. He wondered if there was only one reason he would show himself in front of all these creatures who could so quickly kill him. He had never witnessed a creature approaching, drinking, or leaving the pool be attacked. So, in the current situation, it didn't approach or attack. He continued to approach until he reached the edge of the pool and thought that there was something important about this water source, and he didn't think it had to do with hydration. After all, he still didn't feel any need to drink. He lowered his mouth to the water and tasted it. The water burned Anthony's mouth. For Anthony, it felt like hydrochloric acid. A fiery sensation entered his mouth and flowed straight through his 3 body segments to his stomach. Many pairs of eyes stared back at him. The burning sensation gradually subsided. He noticed that despite the burning sensation, there was no change in his health. Feeling more puzzled than before he had tasted the water, he prepared to leave. But before he did, he couldn't resist one more sip, and again it burned him. He thought that he had investigated the mystery of the water pool. It was time to explore this cavern further and begin to map this cave network using his new tunnel sense. He continued to move in the shadows around the edges of the cavern, avoiding the denser areas of light veins, weaving between pillars of dark stone that stretched from the floor to the ceiling, as if spears had pierced through the ground or plunged from above. He found another cavern just as wide. It tilted in a downward direction, heading deeper into the earth. But there seemed to be something strange about the way the stone there was shaped. It seemed like stairs. Anthony thought that these were absolutely stairs. He approached the cave entrance to closely examine these stairs. It appeared as if these stairs had been carved directly into the rock, and a question arose in his mind. Who exactly would be responsible for carving stairs into solid rock? He found that this was the first tangible evidence he had seen that any sort of humanoid creature existed in this new world. He wondered what sort of fantasy-like people lived there. He thought that this was a very frequently used tunnel. Therefore, they had made it more convenient to travel down here. This meant it was likely there might be more stairs nearby, but leading up instead. He quickly crawled down the wall and approached the stairs leading downwards. This was the first chance he had had to compare his size to an object he could relate to in his previous life. If he could assume that people in this world were roughly the same size as those in his old world, then by comparing his size to the stairs, he'd be able to make a rough estimate of how large he was. All he had to do was hop onto these stairs. That meant all those monsters who looked so terrifying and massive to him, from a human perspective, would be fairly small. He resolutely turned away from the tunnel and began to move further into the cavern. He could see more signs of modification here and there. The further he traveled, the more signs of civilization he saw. He could see that there were very few tunnels branching off the main cavern at this point, not even small ones. Also, the pulsing veins of light along the walls were further apart and thinner, making the space a little darker than further into the cavern. His heart was pounding in his chest now. He might get to see a person from another world. He had so many questions. He thought that this could be a breakthrough in human/ant monster relations. The cavern was becoming more narrow, the steps more frequent, and the slope steeper the further he traveled. Suddenly, his antennae waved excitedly in the air as they got their first taste of dim, reflected sunlight. The surface must be extremely close now. He was excited to get a taste of the surface air in this new world. Gradually, he could see a source of light ahead, reflecting off the stone and diffusing into the cavern. He found a human construction. It looked almost like a wall of some kind. It seemed like some sort of wall constructed against the side of the passage. There were small window slits carved into the stone. Anthony thought, is that a guard room? Even as he was thinking that a bright red light suddenly shone through the windows in the wall, and he could hear rapid movements as if someone were scrambling up from a chair. Suddenly, two people emerged from behind the wall, standing on a raised stone platform perhaps a meter off the tunnel floor. Anthony was slightly sad they weren't elves, but they were people. They appeared to be wearing some kind of metal armor with black leather underneath. They both had swords at their waists and tight boots laced up their shins, also black. Judging from their figures, it appeared as if one was male and the other female. The female guard seemed to be holding a crystal of some sort in her hand that was emitting a bright red light. Anthony thought perhaps that is how they detect monsters approaching. Suddenly, the male raised both hands and incredibly, they began to glow with a bright, burning light. He appeared to close his eyes to concentrate as the light formed into strange shapes or runes that slowly revolved around his hands. Anthony thought, is this magic? He wondered if these people could teach him. He also thought that if the red crystal was meant to detect monsters, then he was the guard's enemy. He tried to run away from that place. He blamed himself, thinking, what the hell was he doing waltzing up to monster guards when he was a freaking monster? He could hear shouting and footsteps pounding on the stone behind him. A blast of heat exploded on his right and another on a rock just in front of him.